Today, I have something to get off my chest, and that is the lack of Asians on Firefly. So I've been hearing for years about how fantastic this show is, how it's a classic that got canceled too soon. It's on Netflix, so a couple months ago, I just marathoned the whole thing. Overall, pretty decent production. The premise of the show is that it's a futuristic fusion of Chinese and Western culture that has expanded into space, which brings me to Asians. I can't be the first to notice this. Despite a smattering of Mandarin fragments awkwardly shoehorned into the dialogue, traditional Chinese food, artwork, calligraphy, there are zero Asian characters of significance on Firefly. I want to stress, of significance. I know some people have been like, oh, well, what about those random travelers on that train in that one episode? Or what about that Prazi? No. Asians have already spent the majority of mainstream TV and film history shoved into the background as extras and ridiculous stereotypes. And now on a show that has the perfect context for the representation of Asians, Asians are again relegated to the background as extras and stereotypes. Even the characters with Chinese surnames aren't played by Asian characters. What? To me, as an Asian woman, this is an obvious gaping oversight. Why would you insert bits and pieces of my heritage into a show and not properly represent any of the people from whence these things came? If you had a similar premise but with Indian instead of Chinese cultural fusion, would you then have women in saris, Sanskrit everywhere, Indian surnames but no actual Indians? First of all, that's a huge hole in the setup that makes the premise very hard to buy into. If Western and Chinese culture mix to the point where everyone knows a little bit of Mandarin, kind of hard to believe that there wouldn't be any Chinese people around, even in the intergalactic government. And it's not like Joss Whedon has given us a good reason why. Granted, they may have explained this more if there were more seasons, but I think 14 episodes is plenty good enough to give us some sort of reasoning to work with. Also, I feel like a lot of Asian/Chinese characters might have pronounced the Mandarin better, because everyone on the show speaks it very poorly. I've spent many childhood Sundays learning Mandarin and interacting with Mandarin speakers, and I didn't know the characters were speaking Mandarin at first. I thought they were speaking gibberish, and then I flipped on the subtitles and I was like, oh. I'm not saying my Mandarin is magnitudes better, but you know what? It's not my job to speak it on TV. And down to the core reasons why I find this sort of thing really problematic. Recently, someone on Twitter summed up cultural appropriation really well. Imagine working on a project and getting an F, and then someone copies you and gets an A and credit. When you do something like insert a piece of culture into a story and don't properly represent the people, those bits of culture lose their significance. Instead of being the culmination of an entire people's history and intellect and artistry, they're now just novelties and movie props. A piece of calligraphy isn't something to be properly appreciated and understood anymore. It's just a piece of superficial decoration. I've said a lot to criticize Firefly, but understand that I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad show. Again, it's a decent show with compelling characters and a really interesting concept. But I still think it's important to be aware of different ways that something fits into an overall trajectory of pop culture. There is a long history of whitewashing and appropriation of Asian characters and culture. Unintentionally or not, Firefly participates in that, and that makes it hard for me to get behind it as a celebrated work of sci-fi. If anyone wants to expound on this topic, feel free to comment below. Please subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys next week.